part of what we're talking about here is that success in recovery is not just measured by the length of your abstinence, the length of your sobriety. So while it's one thing for me to say that, I now have over 26 years of sobriety in terms of sexual addiction, that would be pretty hollow if I couldn't also say at the same time that I had grown in these dimensions of my life that we're going to talk about briefly today.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. I'm Randy Evert, your co-host, and on today's Legacy presentation, we're going to be talking about how you can measure the progress in recovery through the 5 dimensions of sexual health. Here now is Dr. Mark Laaser and the Faithful and True podcast.
Today I thought we'd talk about an issue that comes up all the time here at the center, and that is the question of when we use the word recovery, we're talking generally about the healing journey that takes place when an addict has recognized that he is dealing with his own powerlessness in terms of an addiction. And we obviously in our field borrow the word recovery from, the original field of addiction recovery, alcoholism. And recovery, I think, can mean some other things other than just length of sobriety. So today I kind of wanted to address that and just talk to our listeners about some other ways that they might think about how they're making progress in their healing journey.
Right, a valuable way of taking a look at their personal situation and gauging where they are along that road.
Well, I think as our listeners know, my own journey began because of an intervention, and at that intervention, there was a recovering alcoholic. If it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have gotten to treatment and wouldn't be sitting here this morning. So I've always felt a huge debt of gratitude to Alcoholics Anonymous. And what's interesting about that is that throughout my life, going back to high school and college, I wasn't a drinker. For whatever reason, when I drink too much alcohol, I just get violently sick. I'm not claiming any moral credit for the fact that I was never an alcoholic. But on the other hand, I certainly related through my own addiction with the teachings and the wisdom of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my first recovery group when I got out of treatment was an AA meeting. And so as a result of that, I've studied AA quite a bit and been around recovering alcoholics quite a bit. And one of the things that really fascinated me early on was, among hundreds of their sayings, one of them was this term that they sometimes apply to each other called being a dry drunk. And a dry drunk, one basic definition of it is that it's a person who is not drinking. They're successful at stopping their alcoholism, and they're not growing personally. They're still kind of stuck in whatever emotional state of development or what Alcoholics Anonymous would call character defects. They just haven't made any progress in their personal or spiritual development. And when an alcoholic is technically what they would call clean, in other words, he's not drinking, they may not be sober if they're not growing personally. So that's where I'm coming from this morning. So in other words, if we want to be sober in the larger definition of sobriety, what are some of the elements that might involve?
Well, I like the point that you tie in one of the key components that is implemented here at Faithful and True is that combination of the clinical sobriety, but also the spiritual aspect. And as you said, alcoholics who are dry drunk, or who are not making a spiritual advancement, are missing one of the key components in their recovery.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things we try to emphasize here at Faithful and True is, while it's incredibly important to stop all of your sexually sinful behaviors, and we, emphasize that every day here, it's also true that stopping something is not the only goal. Starting other things is also part of the goal, and we try to emphasize that as much as we possibly can. So today I thought I'd talk with the listeners about a very old model that I've used since 1987. It's actually called the Healthy Sexuality Model. It was first developed by a colleague of ours in Nashville, Tennessee, by the name of Ginger Manley. And I just want to make sure I give Ginger credit. She's the first person I heard talk about this broader model. And she, like the theme of the show today, was talking about the fact that recovery in our field is so much larger than just stopping something. So the model has 5 dimensions. So I think one last thought here, and that is that part of what we're talking about here is that success in recovery is not just measured by the length of your abstinence, the length of your sobriety. So while it's one thing for me to say that I now have over 26 years of sobriety in terms of sexual addiction, that would be pretty hollow if I couldn't also say at the same time that I had grown in these dimensions of my life that we're going to talk about briefly today.
Well, that's a strong point too. I think that kind of aspect doesn't cross the mind of your everyday man that's struggling with these issues.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's another element of this that I get a little hesitant to get into, but the truth of it is that there are men out there that are perhaps occasionally slipping a little bit. They might be looking at pornography again, and they might maybe get involved in masturbation again or something like that down the road. And they might continually be resetting their sobriety date. So rather than having 26 years or 1 year, they might be looking at 30 days or 90 days or 6 months or whatever it is. They can be very tempted to get very discouraged about the fact that they're not accumulating a long length of sobriety in terms of, my date is, such and such a time, 5 years ago. I want to be clear. We emphasize here at Faithful and True that a man, when they get humble and broken, they can in fact be completely sober, free of sexual sin for the rest of their life. But I'm also just recognizing that there are a fair number of men that don't achieve that right away. And what I want to speak to with that today is that it's still possible to be growing in some of these other dimensions, even though you might not be as totally successful in your sobriety as you would like, and I know certainly your spouse would like.
Okay.
Let's get into the dimensions. There is 5 dimensions, and the center of it is spirituality. And around the outside of this diagram, there are these 4 dimensions: physical dimension, relational dimension, behavioral dimension, and then also the personal dimension. So let's start with the middle, where we should, and let us just say, because we can't get into this in any great depth here, this show, but one of the things we dramatically emphasize here at Faithful and True is that recovery is a process of spiritual growth, that we are aiming at greater spiritual depth, more connection with Christ, a greater sense of reliance, dependence on God, increased devotional time, prayer time, Bible study time, that a person who is in recovery, is in the healing journey, is continuing to grow in terms of their spiritual maturity.
Now, would part of that be an enhanced realization of God's intention for us to be men of valor? That type of
that's definitely it. I think part of spiritual growth is on the front end recognizing your brokenness, your powerlessness, your need for God on the front end. But then as we grow spiritually, it's also coming to a profound sense of calling, vision, God's plan for our life, God's plan in terms of us as men of valor, like you were saying, leaders of our home, examples to other people. Whatever the vision is, I think God calls us to be men of integrity, men of valor, men of courage, men of leadership, men of example. I think that's all part of spiritual growth. And one of the things we emphasize here is the whole idea of spiritual discipline. The classic spiritual disciplines are prayer, meditation, and Bible study in order to help get there. All right, so back to our discussion of other ways to measure progress and to talk about the healing journey, how to be both clean, free of sexual sin, and sober, growing in our own personal life. So far, we touched briefly on spiritual life. One of the dimensions is physical self-care, the physical dimension of growth. One of the things I notice about a lot of addicts is that, they also have, in some cases, other addictions, like they overeat, they don't exercise, their personal disciplines in terms of physical health are just not that good. So one of the other things that we're interested in is developing, in terms of personal growth, the concept of self-care. Other addicts are smokers, or they may have problems with drinking. One of the things that I was confronted with when I was in treatment was the idea by my psychiatrist, who said to me, "You're in as much denial about being a diabetic as you are about being an addict. You're just not taking care of yourself. You're not measuring your blood sugar enough. You're not eating the right things." So for me, part of personal growth and recovery is learning more about self-care physically. And there's so many things we could talk about there, but I'm just challenging the listeners to think about the fact that we could, be scriptural. The body is, in fact, the temple of the Holy Spirit. How are you treating that temple? That's about all the time we have today to make them feel guilty about their own level of physical self-care. The next level that we could talk about is the behavioral dimension. And behavioral basically describes, are there behaviors in our life that we'd like to change, habits that we'd like to be different? And then we get into a discussion that we've had several other times on the show, and that is, are we using our accountability network to make any positive changes in our life? So our accountability network, the groups that we go to, the friendships and relationships that we have, is not just about changes that we're making in terms of our sexuality and our freedom from sexual sin. It's also about any positive changes that we need to make in our life. And we need to have, as we talked about on the show last week, encouragers in our life that are reminding us to be consistent with those changes that we're committed to. So accountability and the ability to make change, I think that is an incredibly important part of personal growth. The next dimension is the personal dimension, and this has to do with a very, very large subject, and that is the fact that every addict that I've ever known has a certain amount of emotional woundedness in their life. They may have abuse in their past. They may have wounds that they carry from their life. We're not just talking now about your families. We're talking about situations that happened at school or at church or wherever else it did. I think that personal growth in the field of recovery has a lot to do with understanding your past, understanding the core beliefs that you still carry inside yourself because of your past, As you know, one author titled a book, Making Peace with Your Past. Growth, I think, means dramatically understanding that you are the person you are today because of your past, and that there may be some good things about it. One of the questions we always ask the men here is, even though you might say that you experienced some tremendous forms of abuse growing up, could it also be possibly true that you're stronger today? You have some skills, you have some abilities because of whatever your past was all about. So one of the things that I know is a sign of personal growth is when you stop blaming the past, when you stop using it as an excuse, when you look at some of the positive things that happened in the past, when you make meaning out of your life story, and also in terms of our Christian faith, even if you recognize that there's been a variety of people who've hurt you in the past, are you able to get to a point of forgiveness of those people? I think that's all part of the journey of personal growth that is a part of this healing model that we're trying to talk about today. So, the one last dimension is the relational dimension, and I think all addicts that I know have what we generally refer to in the field as an intimacy disorder. They have a variety of experiences in life with relationships, healthy and unhealthy, and they're just generally not good at deep emotional connection, being intimate, being honest, sharing. If you think about addiction in general, I mean, most addicts, because of hiding their addiction, are liars. That doesn't contribute to successful relationship when you're living a secret life. So part of growth is becoming a truth teller in relationship, getting honest, talking about your history, disclosing to certainly your spouse, and disclosing to your children, and disclosing to the people that you choose to be in your intimate circle of friends. I know for myself that my healthy relationships extend beyond my marriage with Debbie, but I have my team of what I call wise men in my life, men that are not necessarily always older than me, but some of them are, that I call regularly, that I get honest with, that I seek accountability with. And one of the things I think we learn to do is practice relationship in our lives with other people, and then also that helps us to be a better spouse, and better in all of our relationships, certainly with our children. The book that Debbie and I wrote, called The 7 Desires of Every Heart, really has a lot to do with this relational dimension of our life, and I'm not necessarily trying to sell that book today, but I do know that the relational piece in terms of our circles of friendship and intimacy, that's definitely a sign of progress.
Okay. We, speaking of Debbie, you mentioned earlier in the show that we're going to be having Debbie on the show next week. And this past week, we have received a couple of outstanding emails from listeners. One, I'm going to have you close the show by addressing an issue that one of our listeners came up with. But we got a great email that was asking for us to have Debbie on the show to talk about, in her book, Shattered Vows, she refers to the dance. And this is a great subject that you and Debbie are going to launch into next week on next week's show, when she is our guest in studio.
Well, that's right. And it's kind of a great segue from the relational dimension that we were just talking about, in the sense that one of the qualities of intimacy disorder is that the person that you're the most afraid of losing, the person that you love the most, and therefore are most anxious about losing, that is the person that you might have the hardest time telling the truth to. And it's also true that that person might be the one who triggers you the most. I mean, some other person who you hardly know could say something to you in a tone of voice, and or whatever, or look, whatever it is, and it may not have that profound an effect on you. If your spouse, on the other hand, was to say that, it might send you off into some tailspin, some lonely place, some anxious place. And next week, Debbie and I are going to address, what happens when spouses trigger each other, and how they get into kind of a downward spiral, which we call the dance, and we're going to hopefully address how couples can learn more about that and how they can get out of that dance.
And we thank our listener for recommending that subject. And as we have invited you in the past to do, we are happy to do that sort of thing. As we wrap up today's show, Mark, we got another email from another listener, and it was talking about this subject of sobriety and with attempts to be sober for 90 days or more, and how frustrating that can sometimes be.
Well, I think as I'm reading this email, and of course we can't quote it or even come close to identifying who sent it, but he is basically talking about this dynamic I mentioned earlier, that he's been able in the course of his recovery journey to achieve short-term periods of sobriety or freedom from his acting out behavior, and 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and he says that at that point he'll slip, and then he has to start recounting, his days of sobriety, and it's been very discouraging to him. And that's the population of men that I wanted to talk to, particularly in this show today. That there are other ways to measure progress in addition to your length of days. One of the dynamics that he mentioned is that one of his wise men in his group, or his sponsor, or part of his accountability group, said, you get a little too hyper-focused on counting. And I was really struck by that some of the men that we work with are, for lack of a better word, perfectionists. And they get so caught up with working a perfect program and having X amount of days, and they get too hyper-focused on the length of days. That's the group of men that I really want to reach out to today and say, there's so much more to the healing journey than the length of days. So, don't get me wrong, have a date, be free of sexual sin, but don't focus on it. Focus forward and look at all the positive things that you're doing and all of those dimensions we tried to briefly describe today.
Thank you for watching and listening to today's presentation of the Faithful and True podcast. It's always great to hear again from the late Mark Laaser, and we hope that today's message has been beneficial to you. We hope that if this message today has opened your eyes to the fact that there is help that you need, we invite you to visit our website, faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find lots of resources, over 550 podcasts such as this one, as well as information and online registration for our 3-day intensive workshops. The Men's Journey Workshop we host every month and is available for men who struggle with sexual addiction or pornography addiction. Look into that, and we would love to have you come to see us here at Faithful and True. You'll also see the information about the Women's Journey Workshop and for the 2 couples journey workshops that we offer here at Faithful and True. Until the next time, we hope that you'll have the coming week will be filled with many blessings and with great vision.